tanti anni forse vale la pena di non dire, vive a Firenze, ha un modo affascinante di porgere i suoi argomenti, e oggi, per spirito di ospitalità, parlerà in inglese e quindi la sua relazione introduttiva sarà The New Week. Parola a Piero Ferrucci.
Buongiorno. So, well, first of all, I want to give a deep thank you to Gianni and to Paola and to Daniele and to all the volunteers, because I think they have done a wonderful job, and I had a feeling, I've gone to many Psychosynthesis conferences, but I think this will produce a quantum jump in our movement. So I think we have a lot to be grateful to them for. And after saying this, I want to tell you about a somewhat disturbing experience that I had some time ago. Maybe one of you can give me a session about it. Because if you know the American story of Rip Van Winkle, you will know what I mean. Now, Rip Van Winkle was a man that fell asleep. And then when he woke up, he just went out in his city, and he found that all the places were somewhat different. There were new buildings, and the people were dressed in a different way, and he couldn't recognize them, and they couldn't recognize him. And in fact, people were talking in a different way also. And then he realized that he had a very long beard. And then he knew he had been asleep for 30 more years. Now, I'm afraid something like that has happened to me too, because some time ago I went to sleep and I was hearing some nice voice saying, visualize the blossoming of a rose and meet the wise old person and trust the process. And then I went to sleep, and it was a very deep sleep. And then I woke up with a job, and everything was different. There were armies of cognitive psychologists all over the places, and people were talking about neuroscience, brain imaging, evidence-based psychotherapy. They would ask you, well, what are the neural correlates of your state of being right now, and things like that. And I thought maybe we're obsolete. All good things come to an end. But then I looked more into this stuff, and I realized that many of the things that I could find in the most prestigious psychiatric, psychological, medical journals about such things as spiritual qualities, and the will, and empathy, and the perception of beauty, and many other issues, Assagioli had been talking about many years ago. So maybe you don't have to give me a session after all, because that was very comforting. In fact, I even wrote a paper which will come out in Italian and in German in the fall. And anybody who wants to publish it in English can have it. Just ask me and I'll give it to you. And the paper is about how we can learn psychosynthesis anew by studying a bit of what neuroscience is telling us now. So I won't be talking about that today, except I will concentrate on one particular aspect, which is the will. Because there is a lot of talk and research done on this subject. You know, before I went to sleep for 30 years, the will was supposed to be the Cinderella of modern psychology. Now it is the queen of psychology. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of papers and researches on the will, and maybe they don't call it will, they call it volition, they call it free will, they call it resilience, they call it many different ways, but we are full of evidence. It's a very good thing. Of course, there is temptation to go to these people and tell them, you know, excuse me, my teacher said the same things that you're saying, but he said them 50 years ago. But maybe it's better not to do it. But to study this stuff, because there is a lot of very helpful ideas. And this afternoon, we didn't have much time, but I will talk at least about a few of those. Take, for instance, what the Templeton Foundation, there's a foundation called Templeton Foundation in America, and they are funding they have found, somebody already won them, so there's no chance for us, but they funded $4 million to do a research and to find out if free will really exists. Because they say, very interesting wording, they say free will is at the heart of our judicial system, of our moral reasoning, and our social relationships. So we better find out if such a thing really exists. And if it doesn't exist, we have to study ways in which to adapt to that reality. And this second part is fun if you think about it, because if free will does not exist, well, that's it. We don't have to do anything. We cannot decide anything anymore. So whether we adapt or not is not up to us anymore. But I think free will exists after all. And I want to take, before telling you about some of these researches, I want to first tell you an Assagioli story. Now, when I tell an Assagioli story, some people go on, not another one. But some other people like it, so I'll side with them and I'll tell you. Because at some point, Assagioli was dictating to me some ideas about science. And he said, well, you can say that there is a silence of the body, which is relaxation, and there is silence of the feelings, which is deep calm and serenity, and there is silence of the mind. And then he had a moment thinking, and then he said, there is also the silence of the will. And he saw that I sort of jumped on the chair because I liked that idea. I didn't like the will very much at that time. Like many of us had that phase. And then he said, no, I've changed my mind. Strike that off. Because I don't want to give the idea that the will does not exist, or that the will goes to sleep. The will exists if we activate it, and it is not silent. And another thing I want to say before we look at the novelties is about disidentification. There has been actually a lot of work on the brain and disidentification. There's clear evidence in the brain of what happens when we disidentify. And disidentification, as you all know probably, there are hard versions and soft versions. Soft version is I have a body, but I am more than my body, because we don't like to say, not my body, and we are afraid that people will get scared if we say it. But I think it's good to also go with the hard version. And I wanted to read to you a note by Jolly. It's a personal note that he wrote probably after meditation. He writes, I felt disidentified, free from things, events, people, activities, and even my own body. What a relief. I felt that I could act while remaining free. I realized the misery of our various attachments that bind and torment human beings. I resolved that I would always address myself silently to the deep soul of anyone I meet. So I wanted to mention this identification because that, of course, is the starting point. The true will only can come from the center. Only in that way it is light and it is true. But now I think I would like to tell you a few of what we could even call the new qualities, because there are so many aspects of will that have been studied in these past 3 years. Take, for instance, autonomy. Autonomy means, as it has been researched, basing ourselves on our intrinsic motivation. There is this difference which is basic between intrinsic motivation and extrinsic motivation, which is easily explained. If I read the book, for instance, because I'm interested, that is intrinsic motivation. It comes from me. If I read the book because someone told me to read it, that's extrinsic motivation. And you can transform one into the other, unfortunately. For instance, they made this experiment. They had people, some students, play with some puzzles. And they liked it. It was enjoyable to play with these puzzles. Then the next day, they gave them the puzzles again. They told them, well, this time, every time you solve a puzzle, we'll pay you. We'll give you money. And of course, the students played even more with the puzzles. But then, the real point comes on the third day, when they told the students, well, now the funds are finished and we can't pay you anymore, but if you like, you can play with the puzzles. And the students didn't play anymore with the puzzles. Or they played much less. They had been robbed of their intrinsic motivation. So anytime we want to give a prize to a child that has been doing well at school, don't do it. Because we are taking away from the intrinsic motivation. It's something very deep, because it's all about listening to ourselves and to what we will to do. There is a beautiful essay by Emerson called Self-Reliance. In it, he tells us, trust yourself, listen to what you know, listen to what you think, don't conform. The way to hear the whispers of eternity, he says, is to listen to what goes inside you. And this is autonomy. This is finding our intrinsic motivation. Another quality could be, for instance, resilience. Resilience is the capacity to bounce back after a grave crisis, after a tragedy, after maybe not even a tragedy, but after something unpleasant has been happening to us. This has been amply studied. Usually it is defined as the capacity to adapt to a new situation of crisis, but I don't think this does justice to this quality, because it's really about the beauty and the strength of the human spirit. Take, for instance, there was a study on the boys from Sudan. The boys in Sudan, they were 10-year-old boys, and there were thousands of them who came back home after tending to the cattle, and they found that their families had been killed. And so they had to flee out, and they had to go to the desert to be safe. And they lived in the desert for a long time, I think for years, and some of them died. There was the risk of thirst, there was the risk of lions, and several of them managed to reach Ethiopia and other neighboring countries. Now that is resilience, the capacity to be brave and to challenge a difficult situation, the will to live. A similar capacity is hardiness. I told already the translator that hardiness, I don't know why, I'll have to look into that, but there's no Italian translation for hardiness. Maybe we're too soft, I don't know. But basically hardiness is the capacity to look upon difficult situations as challenges. So it's something very similar to resilience, but hardiness comes before the big stress. And so you just go into the stress. You don't protect yourself if you have hardiness. Whereas resilience usually comes is what comes afterwards, capacity to bounce back. Then another capacity, control. I'll tell you about an experiment that you all know, but I want to tell you anyway, and you'll see why. And it's about the 4-year-old children that were put in front of a suite, and they were left alone. They were told, if you eat the sweet, fine, but if you can stay for 15 minutes without eating it, which is, like for us it's waiting a cup of coffee for 2 hours. If you stay for 15 minutes without eating, you'll get good. You probably all know about this experiment, because then 1/3 of the children managed to wait for 15 minutes, and then they looked at the same children 10 years later, and they were much better in school. They had better relationships with peers. They had better relationships with adults. According to all measurements, they were in a better shape, and that was all because of the capacity to control their impulses. Now, recently, a 30-year study, there's a lot of importance that is being given to this, I think rightly so. A 30-year study was finished in New Zealand, in which they studied a group of people in the same way, but across a much longer span. And apparently this advantage not only stays, but when those people were 30, they had better health, less psychotherapy sessions, better relationships with the mate, more stable work, all the measurements that they look at in these cases. And control is, of course, the quality of the will. In a way, it's the new will. In a way, it's the old will, because you can see in, Plato, for instance, talks about it. When he says that the human soul is like a charioteer on the chariot and holding 2 horses. 5 in the Upanishads, and depending on the tradition, there are 2 or 3 or 5, but there's always some horse, which of course is a wonderful symbol for the more impulsive part of us that need to be in some way controlled without being repressed. What else? Of course, self-efficacy is something that has also been studied for the past, I think, 15 years. Self-efficacy is how much confidence we have in our own capacities, in our own competence. The same person, 2 people, you take 2 people, one has, that's obvious, they have the same competences, but one has more trust in his own competence, the other one less. And the person who has less competence, when he meets a difficult task, he will flounder, he'll become nervous, he will not know what to do, he'll become anxious. And so self-efficacy, you'll find again hundreds of researches on this topic. Will exercises. There are people doing will exercises, and they never mentioned us. Tough luck. But the will exercise work, and that is what counts. In Australia, there are 2 psychologists who have people focus on one area of their life. Say it is reading. Okay, well, focus on that area, do an act of will every day on that area. You want to improve your reading, read for half an hour every day. You want to choose health, okay, you're going to exercise 5 days a week, or whatever the people will choose. And after a few months, not only will they have more will in that particular area, they will have that the will have spilled into other areas. So if you have worked on the reading, you will also exercise more. It's 3 prizes here. I would still want to add 2 qualities that you find much less about, but I think they are essential, especially in this period of our times. And one is the depth, because I believe that this is the era of surface. In fact, we surf on the internet, and we are always distracted. And the moment we have a deep contact with somebody, you can be sure the cell phone is going to ring, and so on and so on. We are a distracted society, and being distracted, we become brittle and dispersed. Depth is about going deep into a subject, into a relationship, into a project, whatever it may be, in spite of distractions, in spite of frustrations or whatever. And the other quality that I want to tell you about is that you don't find mentioned very much, but I would like it to be mentioned more, and it is integrity. To me, that's a quality of the will, because it shows the distance that there is between your values and your behavior. For instance, I am all for a clean planet and for the harmony of the planet, and then you don't recycle your paper. Or I am for faithful loyalty to my partner. That should be the law for everybody. And then you cheat. Or everybody should pay taxes. I'm just mentioning the things that are most common in this country. Everybody should pay taxes. But then bit or a lot. And especially if we cheat a lot, I think that takes a lot of effort. And I'm not saying this from a moral standpoint. I think that psychologically speaking, it splits us into two, because there's a voice that says, hey, you shouldn't cheat. The real value is this, remember? But then we do it the other way and we're split. And that's painful. I'm sorry for the people who cheat. At least the ones who cheat a lot. Cheating a little. What else I want to say? Time is running short. But, well, I wanted to finish by telling you a couple of things. One is a Jewish story. Because we are in the midst of a multiplicity of ideas and theories that are very interesting and beautiful. And the Jewish story is about this. And the story is that there was a very advanced and beautiful soul that was coming to earth. And his name was Zihikoi. And this person would free the people that he would get in touch with and fill them with love. And then the devil came to know about this. And he said, oh my God, I'm going to go out of business if this man comes. So he ran to the celestial court, because there is a celestial court, in case you don't know. And he said, please, don't let this happen. I don't want to go out of business. And the celestial court looked at the thing and he said, well, you are right. However, looking at what is happening right now, this soul is already in the advanced stages of incarnation. So, we cannot stop. He will come. However, we have something for you. And we'll make another soul come, which is equally advanced. And you will be able to create luminous ideas. And you'll be able to create beauty. But he will be entirely under your control. So I think that's what made us so confused. And it's something to look at, because I think that there may be ideas which are not diabolical. This is just in the story, but there may be ideas and theories that can mislead us, can make us lose a lot of time, and can give us the wrong image of who we are and of what we can do. One such idea is the idea that the will does not exist. Free will does not exist. In fact, they found that people who believe that free will exists are in a much better shape. We can probably predict what's the probability of you getting a cold tomorrow morning if you believe in free will or if you don't. And people who believe in free will are also less aggressive and more helpful and more efficient in their work, just because of their belief. I also wanted to finish with another Asagoli story, but I really have to tell you this, because I wanted to, when I was studying with him, I was trying to find all the most difficult questions I could. I tried to, this is the way in which I learned. So I tried to create some tags. And one day I went to him and I said, well, if you say that a will is like training a muscle. So, but if you train a muscle, then you stop training, the muscle will become weak again. And so it's the same thing happening with the training of the will. How long will the training of the will last if I do a lot of exercise of the will? And he, at that point, as a joke, he looked deep into my eyes, and I could see his gaze reaching deep inside me in a way that was even a little uncomfortable. And then he said, every act of will you do will be recorded in the eternal memory of the soul. And since then, I've been wondering about the meaning of this. And I'm still wondering, and I'll let you wonder too. Thank you.